Okay, it is 8 o'clock, so I'm going to make a start. So we've got. Thanks for joining, and good morning, Australia. We thought it would be a nice thing to do to have an evening session to allow people in Australia to do this first thing in the morning for them. And I hope you're all enjoying the conference so far. This is our first papers session. We've got our first paper from Fidele, Siv, and Carol. And then we've got a paper from Sandy on the moderating role of leadership and the association between the use of information systems and organisational performance. Then Michelle is going to talk to us about collective leadership and the Queensland Indigenous Labour Network. And then finally, we've got Linda and Stanley, who are going to talk to us about reserved voices. I haven't seen them in the participants list, but they've still got a while to join us before their paper's up. But first, we're going to hear from Fidele, primarily, I think, with some help from Siv and Carol, if she's here, on rebooting service providers' collaboration with the leadership of hard-to-reach minority ethnic groups. And the way this is going to work is, is 15 minutes for the paper presentation. I'll do a warning in the chat box when we get to 14 minutes. And I'll kind of verbally interject sometime just after the 15 minutes to ask you to draw to a close if you haven't done that. Does that sound okay? Okay, Fidele, then it's over to you.
So I'll unmute myself and start, and hopefully technology won't let us down. Let me see if I can share my screen, but hopefully we won't need to go to look for a backup plan, obviously. Oh, yes. I should be able to. Okay, loading presentation. And then I'll go into how do I do content only? I'm trying to see how I can get a full screen.
We can see them really clearly on the screen, Fidele. Are you having issues your side, or are you okay?
No, that's fine. If you can see, then we are all good. Okay.
Yeah.
So yes, today I'm going to try to sum up in a very short period of time the work we have been doing with my colleague Steve, who is on the core, and Carol, who is on the core as well. And what we have been looking at is looking at how the service providers, i.e. local authorities, the local health services, and the local council, how they are engaging with the leadership of Black and ethnic minorities. In the context, initially we started with COVID. We looked also at Black Lives Matter because of our firm belief that if you want to address any issue, you have to get people who are affected by the issue to partake in the process of addressing this particular issue. And I thought I would start by probably reflecting on the whole idea of, why is it a problem? There's no problem because service providers will always tell you they consult and engage with minorities in this particular case. But there is a difference between talking to and communicating with. And I couldn't find a better description of what I'm saying than getting a quote from George Bernard Shaw, which you can see on the screen. I don't need to read it. So, which takes me to the issue at hand. The issue at hand is, I, as a member of those minority ethnic groups, visible minorities, depending on where we are saying it, I have seen time and again, attempts to engage with people from minority background, but it is often the case that there is an issue around the whole representation of those communities. And I keep on asking myself when I'm invited, why am I invited? Why are the other people not invited? And then I get told that you are invited because, you are easily accessible. And those people who are not in the room, it's probably because they are hard to reach. So when we embarked on a journey, we went to find out what is happening in the context and then discuss and hear what both the ethnic minorities and the service providers have to say. So I recently looked back to try to figure out how did this whole notion of hard to reach come about. It transpired is it started in the context of marketing, where people involved in marketing were wondering how they could go and sell goods to people who are not part of the mainstream. But over time, this issue went into education, policing, healthcare, and so forth. And the irony is that it is one coin which you have to look at when you toss, is it the people who are hard to reach, or is it because the service providers are not doing enough to go and reach those communities? And that's a question we've been asking ourselves over the last 1 year. And this work will continue with some follow-up work. And hopefully, if we meet again in 2 years' time, we might be better prepared to tell you exactly what is going on. What I'm presenting today is literally the headline from what the stories we have been told, rather than we analyzing and putting a stamp on what we have heard. So I will talk a little bit about the research. Then I'll get a few voices from people who participated in the research. And when they have finished, then I'll offer my observation, which will be looking particularly at why we need to reboot how the service providers engage with those communities. So as we heard earlier from Owen, the Open University has got a social mission, and that's probably why it attracts the likes of me, who are interested in change making and doing leveling the playing field. And obviously, this research came out of the context of COVID and the whole idea of health inequalities. And also, there were a lot of happening along the health inequalities exposed by COVID, if not least the Black Lives Matter movement and the calls it made about the representation of Black and ethnic minorities in the US initially with the George Floyd, but also further out, including the UK, and I'm very sure it resonates with people in different places. So the research itself, we were looking at how our research, our teaching, our engagement could add value to building collaborative relationships between BME individuals and organizations and the service providers in the context of dealing with the issue of racial equality and to address racial inequalities. So we were looking at the dynamics of collaboration between the service providers as well as the Black and ethnic minority communities. And what I'm going to do now, I'm going to ask my colleague, I'll stop sharing the presentation slide, and then we'll get to hear the voices of some of the people who participated in the research. And then when we finish, I reflect on that, and then I will leave the scene for questions and answers. Over to you. Thank you for taking the lead.
I've been asked to raise the topic around hard to reach communities, which is there's a slash after that phrase, seldom asked or seldom heard BME communities, which is a sort of an interesting take on that idea of hard to reach, because hard to reach has been in the vernacular and in the vocabulary for quite a while. And I know in terms of writing funding applications for the arts, there are sometimes little phrases or little questions saying, how are you going to get in contact or include hard to reach communities? So when I was in one of the focus groups last week, somebody said, well, there are no hard to reach communities. It's just those who are seldom asked or who are seldom heard. And I suppose, coming from a perspective of the mainstream arts and heritage organisations that exist in Milton Keynes, there are definitely communities that are seldom asked and seldom heard as a result. So I would say that I would love to reach all communities if I could. I would talk to everybody who would like to be involved in the arts and heritage sector. But for me, it's about having the right networks and having the right communication.
So I think sometimes the excuse is, oh, we can't reach them, but then we know their location. So the footwork will sort of open the door for us to be able to communicate with them. Some of the leaders are like gatekeepers, and I said, well, that's very true. But when you do the footwork, you get access to the people. Okay, so there's never anything like a hard to reach group. They are there, but then we need to find out strategies that we can, reach them. Let's do the footwork. Let's interact with them. Then it's not about training so much. Sometimes we say, oh, we need to be trained about it. No, it's about learning. Then, because once we interact with them, then we start learning. Then we get to understand how they work. Also, we also need to avoid making assumptions or, relying on our gut instincts, because you find out that whenever you are with some of them, I mean, this is from my own experience, that there were some assumptions made. And it's all because they didn't understand. They didn't have a better understanding of that culture. They didn't have understanding of that community. So they made an assumption that, oh, this is what they do.
Absolutely. I agree with you. We all make assumptions that Muslims, all of them, we can put them in the same pot, or Hindu, or a group of similar features, whether it is face features, whether it is color, whether it is the way they dress, or even their size. This is where the intersectionality comes in. And that's where actually some people might be privileged or actually encounter higher level of discrimination. So within any group, there are multiple groups, and some of them would actually intersect with another group, or vice versa. So an example of that, discrimination in the workplace, it could be that this company in their policies, in the way they look at things, they don't discriminate against black. They already have employed lots of black men. They don't discriminate against women because they already have quite a few women. But for example, if it comes to a black woman, it will become a totally different scenario. Or a Muslim woman with hijab, then it become a different scenario. And that's where it all comes from.
My feeling is that the service providers in Milton Keynes will look for the most high profile BME person, the one they see very often in the press or giving talks at meetings, and they zoom in on that person. And they think that he's the font of all knowledge or she's the font of all knowledge, and leave it at that. I feel that the service providers really have to go out into our community, see the different groups, have a good rapport with these people so that who's who, who's where, and who's got the right information that you need to get. So really, the onus is on service providers to go out. You see, they are in a position of power. They got everything. Whereas we, the community, we're just our little group, and we don't know how to throw our weight, just look after ourselves. Sometimes not familiar with the system. So service providers, they're at a very high level. They know everything about the system, how to get access to all the facilities. So they should make an effort to go out into the community, meet with all these different groups to know their needs, and to also have this sort of rapport and relationship so that the service providers can work to the benefit of the community, and the community also can get their grievances sorted out.
When I see I have nearly used up all my time, but I just wanted to share a slide, and then I'll stop from here, and then we'll allow people to ask questions, because otherwise, okay. So, and the slide I want to share is this one. I hope you can see it. So what we have done is we have been listening, and as you heard from what people said, and we can discuss it during the Q&A, we have been able to identify people who are actively engaging, being consulted by the service providers. Those are faith leaders, as well as those individuals with high profile. We have people who are invited but not listened to. Those are the seldom heard. We have people who are not invited. Those are the seldom asked. And we have people who are not yet engaged. Those are the groups we have been able to identify. And then I will conclude with a few of my frustration this week alone. I've been observing some service providers trying to engage. And this week alone, I had 2 rows, which I'm going to mention without mentioning names. One is obviously people who organize meetings, and then they wonder why the participants from civil society are all white, without realizing that participation has a cost implication. So people are not going to show up if they are at work, compared to the others who work in civil society organizations which are funded. And if they are funded, people are likely to attend. So attending meetings is one thing. If you hold them in working hours when you know the Black and ethnic minority leaders that are doing their responsibilities for which they are paid and feed their families, they are not going to show up. And guess what? When they come up, you have to be very careful to avoid what our participants called fetishization, whereby people are looked at because of how they are dressed, how they dance, the kind of food they eat, and so forth. And then we have to get outside our comfort zone and avoid the echo chamber, make sure we listen to voices who don't tell us necessarily what we want to hear. I think I'll stop here. I have used up my time. Thank you very much, and I think the floor is open for questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Fidele. That was really interesting, and you kept the time well. Does somebody want to pop in with a point or a question? Otherwise, I can get us going. And people feel free to pop their hands up in Teams or drop something in the chat. It's a smaller group, so we can all speak up. I'm just scouring it now. Okay, so down to me then, I guess. So is there something, Fidele, do you think that's particular to Milton Keynes about this? Or do you think some of your findings are more, I mean, I know on the basis just of this project, you probably can't answer that. But in general, from your experience, are some of these issues you're picking up sort of more particular to Milton Keynes, or are they issues to do with hard to reach communities that go broader?
I mean, it will be interesting over time because, we have been talking to a few other groups outside Milton Keynes where we might do some of the experiments. Through, in particular, we are talking to UK community foundations, which have got multiple locations in the United Kingdom. So we might get an opportunity to go and test those ideas. But now reflecting on me, as sort of Black ethnic minority leader, I wish I would say tokenism only exists in theory. It doesn't exist in practice. Very clearly, everybody is trying to make sure that they are seen to be consulting everyone, including those ethnic minorities. And Milton Keynes is a particular case because, as you know, the population of Black and ethnic minorities has been more or less doubling every 10 years. We have census coming up, and it won't surprise me if we are talking about a population of upwards of 30%. So, but if the council or the NHS or the police are holding consultation and those individuals are not represented, there is an issue. So they can't be saying they are talking to everyone. So it is, I could say, this based in MK, but based on my own lived experience, it is something I've seen across the places I have had the opportunity to visit, as well as the Republic of Ireland, where I was, doing advocacy work for so many years. And so I hope I'll be proven wrong, and MK will be a unique case study, but I'm not sure I will be.
No, and I mean it's. I guess in some ways, there was a line in there that I found interesting, which is holding meetings during working hours, and I guess that probably reflects the working patterns of people who work for the NHS or the council or whoever it might be, and they're contracted to work those hours, and so that's when kind of meetings happen as well. And I think a lot of us have been experimenting with when is the best time to hold events and meetings and stuff during lockdown. And there's never actually a really straightforward answer, because if you have things in the evenings, you can exclude, segments of working women in particular. Although maybe not non-academics and so on.
At the same time, though, you can be creative. You can create opportunities for all members of society. So if you are doing a planning consultation, as an example, there is no reason why you can't have a session in daytime, have a session in nighttime, have a session in the morning, have a session in the afternoon. So it is possible if we are willing to do it. And then the question becomes, are people not coming because they are hard to reach, or is it because we are making it impossible for them to be accessible? I mean, that's the balance we need to get. And, and if somebody is, obviously we are aware of this flexible working. So if it is possible, then let's use it to be inclusive rather than hoping everybody will show up when you are ready to see them.
Yeah. Okay. So Julia says, sorry I'm late. I agree that I didn't know you were late, Julia, but apology accepted. I agree that the combination of time, authorized power and location, even online, can exclude so many people. So interesting to hear this is observed. Thanks, Julia. And Daniel said, hard to reach versus reaching hard certainly reflects my experiences from practice in the UK. Very nice. Anything to add there, Fidele?
Yeah, I mean, that's again, when I started, I was asking if service providers were inaccessible or if those Black and ethnic minorities were inaccessible. I think the truth is somewhere in between. And that's what we'll be doing, in particular, a follow-up project to this one here. We will be hopefully working with the police to try to look at how they can increase the pool of the people they consult with. And we'll be looking at those categories of people they are not speaking to at the moment, whether they are seldom heard, seldom asked, as well as they're not yet engaged. So we'll be looking, and if it requires, for example, one of the things I'm looking at it now from the Center for Voluntary Sector Leadership, there may be a case of encouraging people to do our courses in order to enhance their leadership skills, build their capacity to make sure they do things which make themselves visible. Or it could be, working with groups and depending on the direction they'll take, but also maybe looking at bridging the cultural gaps, because I know sometimes people are afraid to go and ask the people they have never met. And agreed with Daniel in particular about, whether they are hard, it is reaching them is hard, or if they are hard to reach. And as I said, I think the truth is somewhere in between.
So I'm wondering, what are the kind of dangers of not reaching hard to reach people? So maybe you can explain to people who won't, be as familiar with this. What in particular? I'm thinking, why don't we focus more specifically on the police things? You just brought it up. So if the police are failing to reach hard to reach people, what kind of material, sort of real life effects does that tend to have?
Okay, so I mean, so thank you for picking one which I'll easily address. because I've been attending some of the meetings of a panel within the police in Milton Keynes. It's called the Proportionality Panel. So where they look at stop and search, where they look at the use of force, whether it is tasers and so forth. I mean, I won't be saying the specific, but one of the example I give, which is very specific and address your question, is I have never experienced stop and search. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So if they are talking to me, what difference will it make? I think they have to go and talk to these young people, because among those people who are not yet engaged, we have those young Black and ethnic minority communities who can reflect back on their experience and how it impacts on them in terms of their personal development, how they feel, their mental health, and so forth. So actually, by not talking to them, they are missing out on very, very important elements of how they can actually address whatever feelings of discrimination those individuals may have. Talking to me, it's perfect. They be seen to be consulting. But as far as I'm concerned, I am probably not the best person to speak to on that particular subject, because I don't have lived experience. And, it is as alien as somebody else will say. I don't go to nightclubs, therefore, it's unlikely for it to happen to me at night.
Yeah, no, good point. So Siv has got a question. Do you think the typology applies in other contexts to, e.g. in a large organization like our own, like the Open University, and the aspirations we have in terms of EDI?
I mean, I couldn't, yeah, definitely. But why am I saying it? I'm saying it because we know, for example, we have got sort of the rate of the number of people from particular communities. We have lower numbers compared to the national statistics. So we should have more Black students, for example. And we have an award gap. Those who come, some of them don't complete their courses, or they don't get good degrees. So the question is then, are we reaching those communities? What are we doing to prepare them, if that's what it takes, to become students at the OU? And is our curriculum inclusive? I mean, that's a question I ask myself all the time, and I don't have an answer. And as long as we know it is in the making, I think we are safe, rather than saying we know everything. And one typical example is, so we are talking about a leadership program, and I'm very sure we have made an effort now. We have got people from Australia being joined by so many people. It will be interesting, for example, at one stage maybe to look at some people who may have had leadership in the past who are not spoken about. Some leaders who are known some communities whom we have never heard about. I think if we do it that way, then people might feel included, and then nobody is going to feel as an outsider. But it's a long journey. We'll get there in the end.
No, I really agree with that, and I love it when people unearth examples of leadership from people who aren't written about in the official history books and so on, because I think it's sort of memory, in a sense, is a very active process, right? It's about bringing the past into the present in very interesting ways. But yeah, okay. So do we have a closing point or question from somebody? Anyone? You can just pop your hand up or just interject verbally.
I'm going to say hi. Owain, can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can see and hear you.
Yeah, okay. So I'm speculating. So obviously, I'm notionally an author on this paper, but I must confess it's all Fidele's work. I pop in and pop out, and we talk about things. But I do think that this typology that you've developed, Fidele, is one that can begin to help us address things like, how do we seek representation in large organizations as well? We have aspirations, and we know it is important in terms of leadership that we have appropriate representation on all kinds of committees and boards and so on. And at the same time, within our own organization, and I'm sure that's the case in many others as well, we actually, the pool of people who we want to have represented, it's not big enough, you know, and we've heard our own VC talk about this, haven't we? And about recognizing that we are forever asking the same visible people to come and help out on all sorts of committees. So I think maybe what the typology helps us do is to begin to ask the kind of questions that we need to ask in order to understand more about how we seek that representation. And of course I'm speculating because I'm taking it from one context and shoving it into another, but I do recognize that we have similar issues, and I don't know if you agree with that, Fidele, but you know, that's how I see it. It's a beginning of understanding how we address this from leadership.
And that's an interesting one, because I mean, on the slide I use the word too white, which can be, it's a sort of, okay, so let's put it this way. In my old job in the Republic of Ireland, I came to the realization that I was not going to bring about change without taking an action. And I know we are diverging, we are going to management and so forth. So one of the things I managed to do was actually to get some resources to set up a paid internship scheme, which allowed people who did not have this experience to allow them to be included in terms of the labor market, to get in the organization, do some training, and so forth. I'm proud to say that when I left Dublin, my old job, one of the interns I recruited took over part of my position. And over time, she got my title. So, but if I had not done what I did, it would not have happened. So I think we are all, whether it is organizations, whether it is consultation, whether it is participation and representation, in order to do anything, we have to move people from the typology we are talking about and bring them to the place where they are visible, going back to what Suresh was saying, so that it becomes natural for them to be considered for promotion or for inclusion. I think definitely, yes, it's a beginning, but let's do something about it.
Brilliant. Thanks, Fidele, and thanks, Siv, for that contribution too. Thank you ever so much. So great start.